Hi there, my name is Nate Kokernot. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about this disagreement that exists in the A Course in Miracles community and outside of A Course in Miracles. It's the issue of duality versus non-duality. People in the Course in Miracles community, like on Facebook, do like to argue about this subject a lot. Some people see the Course as a completely non-dual teaching, and other students of the Course do see it as both dual and non-dual. I think the consensus that I have found to be most accepted on Facebook in that community is that basically A Course in Miracles is explaining how with our thoughts we can get from duality to non-duality. So and then there's a lot of disagreement about what it even means, duality and non-duality. This is the quote here from the Course in Miracles that I think is the most telling about this subject, and it's from the workbook, lesson 152. Salvation is the recognition that the truth is true and nothing else is true. This you have heard before, but may not yet accept both parts of it. Without the first, the second has no meaning, and without the second, is the first no longer true. Truth cannot have an opposite. This cannot be too often said and thought about, for if what is not true is true as well as what is true, then part of truth is false, and truth has lost its meaning. Nothing but the truth is true, and what is false is false. And that's the end of the quote. So the teacher, Nook Sanchez, basically uses a analogy for this of we have a foot in both canoes. So the duality or the non-truth that in this level of reality is that evil exists, and we wouldn't even know what good was without something to contrast it with. That we need evil to understand good. That is duality. That's basically the philosophy of duality. And the Course in Miracles is saying, no, only the truth exists. Love is the truth. That is the awareness that we are all connected. That is just true. And fear is just an illusion, because this world is just an illusion. So if you look at that foot in two canoes thing, you can see, like, if we're being honest with ourselves, we're using fear, we're kind of thinking about fear as like our best friend and our protector, and as a reason to really work on developing the best judgment that we possibly can, so that we can discern whether this person or this something is safe or not safe to approach or to be around. And that is what the ego tells us is going to get us through this life. That's the strategy of the ego. Whereas the strategy that God and Jesus are suggesting is that we want to increasingly put our trust in God or the universe, that they're smiling on us and that they wish us well. And that's actually going to be the strategy that's going to keep us safe. So the way that Nook Sanchez uses that analogy is to say that, as we're students of A Course in Miracles and practicing these workbook lessons, we're basically gently taking the weight off of that foot that's in the fear canoe and placing it in the trust and love canoe. I have a theory that the Hermetic Principles are actually perhaps the way that through our perceptions we came to believe in duality. And it explains the mechanics of it. And it's basically, I think hermeticism was sort of the science up until like Isaac Newton came along. That was how science was. That was like the most, at least back in that age, that was kind of what we would consider science, uh, based on observations and also some abstract ideas. And the mythical figure, perhaps Hermes Trismegistus, who could have lived anywhere from maybe 700 BC to 1200 BC. I haven't really been able to establish that because lots of different articles cite different times that he was alive, and other people think he was just a mythical figure. But he was who the Greek god Hermes was based on, and then Mercury in the Roman pantheon were both based on this god, or this guy, whether he was a mythical figure or a real human being, a sage. There's a lot of arguments, and of course, we could also say there's a lot of arguments today about whether Jesus is a mythical figure, because we don't believe that miracles are possible. That's one view, and then another view is that yes, he was a historical figure, and all of the stories that we're told about him actually happened on this level of reality. So the same kind of controversy exists around Hermes as Jesus, but Jesus is a bit more of a significant historical figure than Hermes. So Hermeticism has 7 principles, and the first principle of Hermeticism is mentalism. And mentalism states that consciousness creates our life experiences, and that the universe is immaterial. It's mental and spiritual. Another way of saying that is perception is projection, that consciousness came first, and then the things that we are seeing and experiencing emerged out of consciousness. So what we think of as reality emerged out of consciousness. So this is kind of the introduction to a series on the Hermetic Principles. There's 7 of them, and all of them combined really help. There's so much parallel to quantum physics, quantum mechanics in the Hermetic Principles that I'll try to detail as I go along. But today I did want to just briefly outline them. So mentalism, like I said, is the idea that perception is projection, essentially, which is something that you hear me say a lot on this channel. The second principle is as above, so below, or correspondence. And this is basically where the power of analogy rests, because the same algorithms that inform the structure of different systems of thought are imposed on all the various levels, meaning like the macrocosm, the collective, and the individual experience. And we could look at things like development or evolution. We could think about evolution as the evolution of consciousness. We could also think about the evolution as the evolution of biological organisms. There's all these different levels in which the same general energies or algorithms, truths, actually apply to. And that's one of my favorite things to do, is to look. I am just an analogy addict. I love to use metaphor because I do see the same patterns in higher places or bigger places as I do in like the macrocosmic places, or the microcosmic places, sorry. So that's as above, so below. And then we have vibrations as the third principle. And this states that energy, in the form of waves and ripples, shape reality. Atoms are spinning vortexes of energy, with ripples radiating out from them. The fourth principle of the Hermetic Principles is polarity. Opposites are the same. If we look at the wave, we see points on it, which are sometimes above the midpoint and sometimes below. The polarity is complete by being at every point on the spectrum at some point. Therefore, the midpoint is what we want to strive for. That would be a neutral opinion. We escape from judgment of good and bad, allowing for the fact that it is a contextual question. Where the particle is at this moment establishes whether it is positive or negative. You must see both sides to know the whole picture. The fifth principle of Hermeticism is rhythm. bringing time into the equation, back to the sine wave, we're sometimes on the way up and we're sometimes on the way down. And when we're up, we're on the way down. And when we're down, we're on the way up. Cycles exist. I've been seeing a client recently talking about the stock market. He's just recently discovered trading. And so every session he's talking about the stock market and watching the waves go up and getting better at understanding like what it means that it's going down is when, finding the timing to predict that it's going to start coming up again. This is all the same stuff. It works on all different levels. The sixth principle of Hermeticism is cause and effect. This states that everything is action and reaction. A thought is an energy, and broadcasting thoughts is a creative act, but it can also be destructive. And I will talk a lot more about the cause and effect in a separate episode, because this is really one of my favorites. It really helps us understand how time can move backwards and forwards when we understand this. And then the seventh is masculine and feminine. Every cell must have both. The masculine is the growth, and the feminine is the support. The masculine is the emergent, and the feminine folds the emergent back into the whole. Imagine kneading more flour into bread to picture what this looks like. So those are the 7 Hermetic Principles in brief. And my theory is that Hermeticism is basically explaining the mechanics of how we turned non-duality into an experience of duality, where both good and evil exist, where both opposites can be true at the same time. And of course, in miracles is essentially the way that we can start to understand how much our thinking is creating what we're observing, so that we can get back to non-duality, back to the truth. And that's exactly where our salvation lies, is in the truth that we are one mind with one agenda. And it's hard not to see how that will bring us a lot more peace of mind. If we believe this, it is also true. This is science. It does predate the modern day science, which did kind of have a limited scope for a lot of people who said, you can't look for causes outside of physical reality. That's not allowed. That's one kind of philosophy about science. But there is another philosophy within science that says, yeah, but if we want to know the truth, we have to be willing to go wherever the data shows us. And that's what people like Donald Hoffman are doing, is starting to step out of the box of space-time reality to look for explanations for why we're experiencing reality like we are. All right, so I'll leave it there today, and wishing you all a wonderful day full of blessings and miracles. And if you're liking this and finding it helpful, please like and subscribe and hit that little bell. All right, take care.